calling the meeting to order at 7 p.m. And prior to starting anything with the meeting, I'm just going to go through and make sure that everybody can hear and be heard. So Peter Beardmore.
Here.
Chris Menard.
Here.
John Henshaw.
Here.
Heather Stroka.
Here.
Dave Passios.
Here.
Okay, I do not see Jay Simeone yet, so hopefully, hopefully he'll be by soon. And with that,
Gary, could I interrupt for a second? I don't see a record button at the top of the window like I usually do. Did you need to start record also? Just asking because I usually see it at the top of my window. There it is.
okay,
I see
it
it
was
now.
on, it was on pause. So yeah, usually I don't have to do this much work to start a meeting. Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It was a good pickup because I just don't usually see it. Okay, so good evening. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. And this meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted remotely. The town of Lunenburg, in response to the COVID-19 virus, is currently following the guidance from the Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent the spread. Basically, over the course of the meeting, we will have public participation. Will be allowed if you are not able to log into the meeting. Then you can send an email to tburchfield@lunenburgonline.com, and we will read that during the public comment at the end of the meeting. That's really the only other thing to report on that is going to be that any votes that we take tonight, which I don't anticipate other than for meeting minutes, will be taken by roll call vote. And that's all there is about that. Do we have any public comment from anybody on the committee? All of a sudden, I lost most of my screen when I opened the chat. I don't know how to close that again. Do we have any public comment from anybody in the public? Seeing none, then I did promise the representatives from Lunenburg Public Schools early access to go over their budget information in advance of town meeting. So Mr. Cassidy has forwarded information, which I have forwarded on to you, which is sitting in also the OneDrive, and which we will be trying to screen share. And I'm not sure what order we're doing that in. I'm not sure if the intention is to screen share the memo or just the PowerPoint. But we will turn it over to, what's the Lunenburg Ledger Air Shirley Tracker?
Yes.
I'm not used to this waiting room stuff. This is just going to be the death of me. I'm going to resign.
No, you're not.
Oh, look, there goes Karen Brochu again. Okay, so basically I'm going to turn it over now to Dr. Burnham. I don't know if you want to begin or Mr. Cassidy, however you want to go, and just let me know what you want to share in what order, and I'm happy to oblige.
I would like to turn it over to Mr. Cassidy. I believe that we intended to screen share the slides. Would that be correct, Mr. Cassidy?
Yes, if you could share the, well, I've got the slideshow too. I don't know if you can allow me to share instead of.
Oh, sure, I'll give you the. Yeah, just don't forget to give it back, or you're going to have to stay all night.
Okay, that's it. That's a deal.
Make host. There you go. Okay, you got it. And I want to thank you for coming in on such short notice, but then the special town meeting isn't that far away.
Can everyone see the slides
Yes.
or the presentation? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So, hi, everyone. My name is Mike Cassidy. I'm the business manager and HR director for the Lunenburg Public Schools, and it's great to be here. It's great to see everybody. We had presented to the school committee last night, and we're sharing the same presentation to you tonight. So, what we would like to present and give an update to you on are the following things, which is the FY budget expenses, and that's COVID related. An update on the grants that we received from DESE. The next one is an FY personnel report. I guess it's more of a personnel update as far as open positions. And the FY 21 budget update as we can see it on October 8th, 2020. And at last night, we had made recommendations coming forward to the Finance Committee, which I will share at the end during our closing. So just to wrap up some FY20 expenditures. So this is really related to when the pandemic started and the closing. So our food service program, the salary and wages from our food service staff were absorbed into the local budget, and the cost of that was $61,878.03. Now the staff, some of the staff didn't work, but some that did come in were doing the grab and go program out of the middle school, high school. And then under the food service program as well, there was $13,450 worth of commodities which were reimbursed under the federal and state food and nutrition programs. Once again, that was not absorbed into the local budget. Another cost that was absorbed into the local budget was the staff of the extended day program. There were 4 benefited staff members that continued to do online programming, mostly light educational, a lot of recreational programming for Lunenburg students from K to 5. Their target audience in the extended day program. So we kept them busy during that closure period. Also, we ordered 329 student devices, which had the Google Chrome licenses, and that cost was approximately $95,000. We also did some purchase of PPE at the end of last year and at the beginning of the pandemic. So Mr. Londa, our facility director, as the COVID was starting to spread, he was purchasing PPE such as gloves and sanitizer units and sanitizer sprayers right before the closure started. So we basically held most of that equipment until the start of the school year, but we also did a supplemental purchase at the end of the year, and it was a 12-week purchase of supplies that was really a guidance from DESE on what a classroom would look like. And that included sanitizer units, gloves, goggles, gowns. What else is there? Face masks. We ordered face masks for adults and students, And we were lucky enough to get some additional sanitizer, hand sprayers, and a backpack through the funding for last year. So that stock, for the most part, got us going for the beginning of the school year.
Mr. Cassidy, can I interrupt you?
Be my guest.
You may have some folks in the waiting room since you're the host.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you. I'll watch that, Dr. Burnham. Next, so that closes our FY20 expenditures as far as COVID response. So during the summer, DESE began releasing various grants, some competitive and some were basically entitlement grants. And the first grant here was, I believe it was a competitive grant that we got. And it was a remote learning grant, and we got it for $55,735. And that was to purchase iPads for our remote learners down at the primary school. So we're in the process of receiving those. The next grant that the school department got was a $377,550 grant, and it was called the COVID Relief School Reopening Grant. And this grant combined with, and I'll just go to the next slide very quickly, the next grant, which is the Emergency Relief Fund, is basically funding some of our one-year positions as we transition and transition back into the school, a lot of social emotional positions, and really a focus on remote learning. These positions are. So we've got a part-time psychologist that is being partially paid out of this grant, a guidance counselor, an assistant principal, a social worker, and a nurse substitute. So we have an extra nurse in the district now. Portions of the grant are going to be paying for the nurse stipend. We're paying one of our nurses to act as a lead nurse, dealing with any issues that may come up with the Board of Health or any issues that may come up in a building. We're using our funds for custodial overtime. These are extra hours that are being offered to custodians to address high-touch areas during the school day. We have additional funds for substitutes that are strictly related to COVID absences. And a portion of the food service director salary is going to be paid out of this grant. And once again, everything is directed to her work that's related to the Grab and Go program, which is our strictly COVID related. Some of the non-salary and wages costs are an additional PPE purchase that we're planning in a couple of weeks, and likely an additional PPE purchase before the end of the calendar year. We have systems in place to be monitoring usage of supplies and equipment, such as sanitizers, masks, gowns, gloves. So we are monitoring that. And it's, as I was explaining it to the school committee last night, we're really trying to focus in on the inventory so we can stay in front of the demand. A lot of districts kind of get to a point where everyone needs stuff at the same time. We're trying to be ahead of that curve. So we're doing a lot of inventory checks. We're looking at using some of this grant money for any COVID-related unemployment costs. Additional technology, if we need classroom technologies, additional Chromebooks, which are very difficult to get at this time. But if we can get some, we will. And then finally, we're looking at using this grant to support new online instructional platforms for students. So we're adopting IXL, Ingenuity. There's many different platforms that the schools are using, and likely may go away as we return to school next year. The next grant, once again, this was an entitlement grant that Lunenburg received. It was the Elementary and Secondary Schools Emergency Release Fund at $198,073. Once again, this is going to support the salaries of the part-time psychologist, guidance counselor, assistant principal, social worker, nurses, the nurse substitute, and substitutes from January 1st to June 30th. Once again, this is a smaller grant, so it really can't support a lot of the additional non-salary and wages expenses, but we're going to use it to support some new stipends to carry us through this year. So we have a behavioral health coordinator supporting the lead nurse stipend. And we've got family engagement liaisons. So there's one per school. If you're not familiar with the discussion that the superintendent had with the school committee, these are positions that making sure that students in our hybrid model do not get lost remotely. So we've got people kind of checking in on kids and making sure that they're staying on track. So those are the three grants that Lunenburg has received. To the best of my knowledge, they all expire. The COVID relief expires December 30th, 2020. The other two expire June 30th, 2021. And no word on any additional funding related to those grants beyond those deadlines. So this is the current personnel update. It's so we do have a few open positions right now. There's a paraprofessional position at the primary school, and it's pending an appointment at this time. There's a paraprofessional at Turkey Hill, and we're evaluating the reinstatement of that open position. So we're trying to determine the need and looking at student needs to reinstate that. We have a paraprofessional position at the high school that's currently on hold. And we're in the process of hiring some long-term sub-custodians, which are grant funded. And then the remote meeting coordinator, which will be able to help all of our meetings run more smooth. We're interviewing candidates for that. So one thing I want to be clear is that the first three positions on this list, the three paraprofessional positions, were budgeted positions in the local budget. The long-term sub custodians are part of the, we're hoping to fund that through the grant money. And the remote meeting coordinator will be looking to split the costs with the town to support that position, and we'll find money in that local budget for that. So the next slide is talking about potential budget surpluses, and I explained to the school committee it's a little early at this point to really identify the actual surpluses, but we're looking at some surpluses. So salary, staff salary savings will be calculated once we hire our last person. Health insurance, the town is estimating that due to the 50% assessment to employees into the town in the month of July, there should be about $118,000 savings against the local budget. So I did get a recent bill today, and I've got to concur that amount is likely going to be the savings. Once again, as soon as we're done with all of our hiring and we know which employees will or will not take insurance, that number will be more clear. But I'd say it's right around that amount. I have to concur. The superintendent and I have scheduled a meeting to meet with the transportation companies to talk about negotiating any potential savings or reduction in the contract for FY21. So don't know, we haven't done that final negotiation yet, but we're looking at a potential savings in that contract. And out of district placements. So I know I got the impression that some students may be coming back from an out of district placement. But on the other hand, I'm also hearing that there's potentially some students that may be going out. So during the year, there could be some savings in our out of district placements. So projected shortfalls. And these are shortfalls that I'm really identifying for January 1st to June 30th. With that COVID relief DESE grant, we can cover a lot of these costs. So these are just costs from January 1st to June 30th. I've identified a cost on custodial overtime. And once again, this is custodians coming in earlier to touch up or wipe down high touch areas during the school day. That's an estimated cost from January to June. School-based substitutes, long-term substitutes. We're seeing people going out a little bit more often. We have COVID-related symptoms, whether it's a cough or sniffles. They're taking those sick times. They're following the precautions that we've issued to them. So we haven't even hit flu season yet, and we're seeing some high levels of substitutes being hired. The PPE purchases. So we're trying to strategically plan what that looks like. As I mentioned before, we would like to use the COVID relief grant to do a purchase probably within the next 2 weeks, and then double up on an order in December. There will likely be another order that will have to be done March or April, and the horizon is unclear on what next year looks like. So if there's funding available, we would likely build up a little stockpile of supplies, depending on what that looks like. And it's my vision that if probably in the best case scenario, everyone comes back next September, I would imagine we would still be supplying some level of PPE in schools, from temporary masks to sanitizer units, at entryways. So I'm not there yet. We're just entering our fourth week of school, kids in school. But we're looking down the road at some point at likely supplying some PPE in the best case scenario next school year. And then there's some additional money that we may need for online learning technologies. So maybe an additional software program for a particular group of students. We might just kind of do a little set aside for that anticipated cost. So those are some identified costs. Here are the unknowns. And the first one is our food service program. And we are, once again, entering our fourth week, I think, of schools. So we're really looking at the number of meals that are being served and the number of hours that it's taking to create those meals. They are still doing the grab and go program, if you're not aware of that. So we are preparing meals for families to pick up. But we are watching that very closely. We've got systems in place to make sure that we're getting revenues to cover the costs. If you know the model that we have, which is the hybrid model, it's half the kids are showing up every single day, so it's half of the meals. We're missing half the kids to serve meals to. So, like I said, it might be. I need a little time to determine what that deficit may look like. I'm gonna flip into unemployment before additional technologies, so unemployment. As we go on and during the school year, and if there's an impact, whether it's a full closure and we have to lay off staff entirely, or we make adjustments at a school-based level, we may need additional unemployment costs. We are nicely budgeted this year for our unemployment, and we do have some money that is under the COVID relief fund, but those are specifically COVID-related unemployment. There are some unemployment costs just due to terminations and other eligible opportunity that employees receive benefits for. So we're watching that one pretty closely too. And then if there's any additional technologies that are needed as we go into this hybrid model, as we expand our instruction, we are going to learn that we may need more equipment to provide a better instruction, whether it's in the classroom or in a remote model. So we're taking a lot of ideas from teachers and from our leadership to try to develop a purchasing plan if we need additional equipment. So that's where we stand right now. And I'm going to go to what I recommended to the school committee last night. And I guess I read it in an email. Does the school committee need an adjustment to the local budget relative to the COVID impact? I think right now, based upon the numbers that I'm seeing, we are secure to finish the school year. If it weren't for those DESI grants, I think we'd be in a little bit of a different situation. But I think we're ready to ride with the local budget that we have and the federal and state grants that we have. Now, I'll go on the record that I said that. I'll go on record that I said that. But however, if there are additional mandates that come our way via DESI, that is going to tip the scales of this budget. We will definitely communicate that information to the school committee, to the town manager, and to.
I'm sorry, just for a point of clarification, when you say that you're going to ride with the budget, I just want to be clear on whether you're talking about at the special town meeting, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this later. Are you talking about riding the budget that may be adjusted back to what it was before we did all of the put everything on hold? Or are you talking about the budget that you're currently working with?
The current budget that we're working with. The budget that was. Does that make sense?
Well, I think what happened was at the time of the, before we went into regular town meeting, there were shortages to your budget, as I recall. And I may not be recalling that correctly. So I'm just wondering if, and maybe the town manager can speak to whether or not there was going to be any adjustment at the special town meeting anticipated in regards to any changes to the amount that was assigned to the school committee or the public schools.
So I think what Mr. Cassidy was saying is the budget that was passed at the June town meeting is the budget they're gonna, there's no additional changes to that budget.
Okay, yeah, so that was my question. Okay.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, Ms. Lemieux.
You're welcome.
And Peter has his hand up. And actually, Michael, anytime you want to, you can give me the host back, and then you won't have to be managing the waiting room anymore. But yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, good. I've got a number of questions. So if any other committee members want to shut me up and put me to the back of the line, feel free, because I've got a page full. So I'm just.
All right. Well, then let me go first then.
Okay.
Only because I'm going to forget this.
No, that's why I gave you fair warning, Terry.
Thank you. I appreciate it. On the emergency relief grant, I guess my question is that going to be also reflected in the budget, or is that held separate from the budget? So a grant that's covering any costs that you're picking up from January to June, is that basically going to be rolled into your budget and the revenue on the revenue and the expenditure side?
Will it be reflected in the local budget? Is that what you're saying?
No, in the school budget. I'm going to assume that the school budget is going to reflect that increase in revenue and that increase in expenditures, or is that held as something completely different? Possible.
That's not reflected in any report that would go to a town meeting. It's not local funds. It's treated like any other entitlement grant that the town receives or the school department receives, such as our Title I grant, or we've got a small family and communities grant that is not reflected in the local budget. It's not tied to local funds.
Thank you. That was the only question I had. Go ahead, Peter.
I actually had a question similar to that, which I think was just sort of a point that I think we should all kind of acknowledge here. By my math, there's roughly $576,000 in grant money funding a variety of positions, all of which come to some expiration either at the end of this calendar year or at the end of the school year. And I just think it's important that those be reflected as what they are, which are, for all intents and purposes, funded on a short-term basis And when we get into the next budget season, we're probably going to be looking at cuts of some of those positions. And I think we need to be careful about how we talk about those and how they're reflected, because in reality, they won't be cuts from the local budget. They'll be the end of grant money. That's just editorial comment that I think we just all need to look at each other and agree that we're doing what's best for the town and for the students this year with the funds that we have available, knowing that those funds probably won't be available next year. Back to questions. You mentioned Chromebooks, and I know there have been issues with delivery of Chromebooks. So my two questions are, number one, do we know when the Chromebooks are coming? And number two, is the lack of delivery of Chromebooks going to affect our ability to close out the previous fiscal year?
The answer on, do we know when to expect those Chromebooks? The answer is no. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get a reliable response from the vendor because they are not, in fact, getting a reliable response from HP. As far as the lack of delivery, closing out, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cassidy, but that 329 Chromebooks that we're still waiting for is on a PO from FY20. Is that right?
That's right. It was encumbered and carried forward in after June 30th.
But suffice to say, that's not going to affect our closing out books or any accounting work that needs to be done to close this out.
No, not to my knowledge. No.
Okay. You mentioned online learning platforms as being funded in a couple of places in those grants.
Yep.
Are these online learning platforms? These are like, I think the term is software as a service. These are pay as you go types of platforms, or are these perpetual licenses where we've paid for them and we can use them, well into the future?
Most of them. Go ahead, Mr. Cassidy.
No. I mean, I can speak generally, and then I know the superintendent can speak into the details, but these are online services, which it's basically a subscription for 1 year.
Okay.
So, and it's up to us to determine whether or not that service is valuable enough to carry forward. I think, at least it's my impression that, these are stopgap software online systems to help kids in the remote model. I'm sure there's value outside of that, but it's just getting us through the school year.
Yeah, understood. And I'm aware of some of them, and I think that they're serving us well, and at least my kid well in a couple of circumstances. So, okay. You mentioned the transportation contract and potential savings there. Recently, the Board of Selectmen and the school committee approved a payment for services not rendered for the previous fiscal year, which drove a very interesting conversation at a selectmen's meeting a few weeks back. It occurred to me during that conversation, largely driven by a lot of the research that Selectman Marino brought to the table around services that really are kind of rendered and are contractually obligated by the vendor, that aren't actually picking up a kid at the curb, but they're more readiness and resilience related services that serve the overall risk profile of the town. And so my question is as we're approaching that contract and looking at some potential savings and that sort of thing, is there potentially the opportunity to redefine some of what is considered a rendered service such that in the event that we have to suspend busing again because we go back to fully remote, there's an outbreak or something along those lines, we don't find ourselves in that situation again?
That's part of the negotiation process with these companies. Right now, and it, remember that payment was really established by the state legislation that allowed towns to bargain with these bus companies. So, it's, I don't even think I shared this with the superintendent, but I know that there is one bus company that is suing a couple of districts that have not paid. So I'm watching that very, very closely to measure the Lunenburg's risk if we do not pay as they define services rendered. So we need to get into a room with these companies and bargain if we can, and basically define what that is. And in some way, those bus companies were ready to go at a moment's notice, right? A very unique situation. May and April. I mean, I don't want to talk about this again, but
Yeah,
it was,
what I'm getting to here, Mr. Cassidy, is, and I understand, and I think most of us understand the background on this.
Yeah.
The issue, as I see it, is that the contract that we are currently, I believe, in the third year of, was written without anticipating everything that occurred in the last 8 or 9 months, right? It was written without anticipating a pandemic and the fact that we might be suspending busing for a number of months, but still requiring services. And so, it just seems to me that the language needs to be updated to address what is a rendered service, what is required, and what isn't, so that we're not getting into, Selectman Adams' definition of what is a rendered service or not, right? Which is literally the situation that we found ourselves in a few weeks ago. So what I'm looking for is, can we get ourselves to the point where we have some clarity and some preparation in our contracts, thus that we can eliminate some of that ambiguity later on?
Yeah. It's an excellent suggestion. Thank you. We'll bring that to the table for clarification. We're in the second year of the contract.
Okay. Thank you for correcting me.
And when we prepared this bid, and when D-Bus submitted their bid, we couldn't imagine that we could be going through this. So I think your perspective on it is well taken. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'm only halfway down my list, so I'm in the interest of time, I'm going to move along here. I know that currently, you mentioned the grab and go program. I know that currently kids who are getting lunches in schools in the hybrid model are not paying for their meals, and they won't be for the remainder of the current calendar year. Where's that money coming from?
Once again, these are the things that we're monitoring. So it's the state and federal food nutrition program is reimbursing Lunenburg for every meal that is being served every single day. So that's where the money is coming from. The challenge, I guess, maybe I didn't highlight it enough, is that unfortunately, only half the kids are showing up, right? Mm-hmm. And we're looking at our staffing costs to making sure that so we could have half the kids come in and those students still not take lunches.
Right. But there's also a take-up rate where something is free versus it's not. You've got to be able to figure what's going to happen in January.
Yeah. Right. So so that's where the revenue is coming from for the staffing and the commodities for that program right now.
And do you have a sense of if we are running in the black on that at this point, or in the red, or do we know?
I don't have a sense, no. I haven't, we're looking at deposits, and I need a little time, and I had asked the school committee
Fair enough.
for a little time just to, because, the hard decision is, releasing staff, and, we have to look at that very carefully before we make a drastic decision like that.
Okay. My remaining questions relate to IT and remote and streaming of educational services. Just so that everybody else is aware, last night the IT director presented the results of a test that the school department ran last week on the bandwidth for the school department and their ability to run concurrent streaming from classes throughout the district. And the district did pretty well, I understand, but the school committee agreed to apply for additional E-rate dollars to offset the costs of expanding our bandwidth in all three of our school buildings. And that's a process that will kick off, I assume, pretty soon to figure out if we can get the E-rate funds, and then we'll assume, so the school department will assume additional budget burden for roughly 40% of those bandwidth costs. But I emailed the superintendent this morning to give her a heads up that I'd be asking these questions, because I've actually been asking these questions via email of the superintendent and the town manager and the IT director for nearly 2 months, relating to what is actually required to live stream classroom instruction when you have students sitting in a room, 5 to 10 students, 5 to 15 students sitting in a room, and 5 to 15 students or more remotely, all participating in the same class. And so in my mind, being somebody that does a lot of hybrid type online meetings, this is where good technology comes in really handy. And, the laptops that were bought for the teachers were built without this intended purpose. The speakers in the classroom, so what my understanding is, what's occurring is an awful lot of experimentation and innovation in our classrooms to figure out how to make this all work, all at the same time that I'm not even sure that the school committee has really looked at the policy requirements to do this, the scheduling implications, all of those things. So I know that this is kind of a big, hairy mess when it comes to streaming classroom instruction, but I'm also fairly confident that we don't have all of the right equipment in our classrooms to do this as well as we can. And so if somebody could characterize whether we do or not, I think at the beginning of this conversation, I think would be helpful. But what I really want to get to is, if we need more money to make this right and to do it better, what are our best avenues of approach to do that? And the town manager mentioned a grant application a couple of weeks ago. There's CARES Act money. There's, potentially unappropriated funds from the town. But the time is, we're running out the clock on this discussion, in my opinion. So I'd appreciate it if the superintendent or the finance director could shed some light on that.
So just to be clear, the test last Friday was just of the middle high school. We have no intention at this time of live streaming classes district-wide, only at the high school. That said, in consultation with our IT department, we do have technologies in the middle high school that were part of the building project that will allow our teachers to live stream. As they experiment with this process, as with anything, they're going to find that they're maybe going to ask for things that would make things easier for them. We're in the process of having conversation about what that looks like and what they feel they might need. I can tell you that they have indicated that they need to have some professional development. I don't disagree. We're likely going to have to make a change to the calendar for professional development days and move the days for the high school. I'm not anticipating that we're moving professional development days that are already scheduled for the district in total, but just for the high school staff and students so that they can, in the coming weeks, have some time for some professional development to better learn how to simultaneously teach students in front of them in the classroom, as well as those students who are logged in from home. They're talking about the need for monitors, but what I'm hearing from my IT team is they do have access to multiple screens. They maybe just don't know that they have access to multiple screens or how to have that access. So we're still in conversation right now to try to figure out what they need in order to do the job well. Clearly, I'm sure we could outfit each classroom with the grandest of technology, but we all know that we don't have the resource to be able to do that. Do we think that we have the resource to be able to get them what they need to functionally deliver their quality education? I think that that's still in a doable range for us right now. But again, all of this, which the public is probably not very aware of, all of this involves negotiation for impact bargaining with our union. So it's a process that's ongoing. Yes, I'm fully aware that you've had questions, and I alerted you, a few weeks back that we were in the process of having to test our capacity before I could tell you whether or not there was going to be additional cost for upgrading infrastructure or the technologies. Again, my IT team is telling me that teachers do have the tools that they need. Do they have every tool that they would like to have? Probably not. Again, we're still working on that. And I will say that relative to the legalities, we did have a consultation with the school attorney, and a form was actually created and sent home to families with all of the other forms that families have to read and acknowledge at the beginning of the year. So that is not an issue. I know that it was a concern when we were talking about things in late July and very early August when I presented the recommendation and the different models that we might be able to open the district with. We did have some concern. That conversation continued in consultation with our attorney, and those concerns are not a legal matter. When we were working on what this would look like in July and having conversations in late July and through the month of August with the teachers union, the initial request was not to expect our teachers to live stream. So that is why we abandoned that thought in early August. And then once teachers returned to school and realized the impact of not being able to live stream and what that means when you have 5 classes that you teach, 5 classes in front of you and 5 classes not in front of you, how do I spend time that's of any quality with the kids who aren't in front of me today when I have to be in front of my other 5 classes throughout the day who are physically in front of me? I think that that's when the aha moment occurred and the conversation amongst the teachers at the high school shifted. And it wasn't until 5 days before school opened that the union approached us about the possibility of allowing teachers to live stream. And at that point, I did not know and did not feel confident that the bandwidth would be sufficient enough to allow for all of our teachers to live stream simultaneously. That, to me, to have rolled forward and abandoned what we were planning to do and reconfigure everything with the assumption that teachers would be able to live stream simultaneously and have the bandwidth not support that, in my mind, would have been a great error in judgment to take that risk, to have an epic fail for our students, and then be scrambling to come up with plan B while students are waiting to learn. So people might have a different opinion, but the timeline, the way things evolved, we made the decisions that we made based on input from the teachers union. And again, their thinking around things evolved as they got back into the building and started to realize what this actually would mean for them. And again, we're doing the best we can to work as quickly as we can to make these adjustments and get the teachers what they need, what they feel they need to do the job well. But we're still fine-tuning things right now. They only just learned early this week that everything went well with the test at the middle high school. We do have enough bandwidth. Now it's a shift in how we prepare to teach. We need to teach them how to use the tools that they already have access to that they may not realize that they have access to, and how to use them effectively. And if there are additional technology tools that we can secure for them, we certainly will. Some of the things that they're asking for, the IT director is estimating, maybe that's $300 a classroom total. I've had a conversation with the principal of the school, and there will still be significant challenges in some of our elective courses. The arts, for example. How do you simultaneously live stream ceramics? You can't. The kids don't have a potter's wheel at home. They don't. So there are some courses that we may not be able to deliver in a simultaneous live stream model. But the core academics, we absolutely will be able to. And again, we're just trying to fine tune with the teachers what this is going to look like. What's the transition over to a full live stream model? What do you think that you need in addition to what you already have that you may not already know you have, in order to do this well? We're committed to doing that, but we don't see at this time that it's going to be a hefty price tag. We're not talking about having to outfit every classroom in the district. We're talking about moving forward with a live stream model just for the high school classes. The feedback that we have so far, although we haven't done the formal outreach for feedback from families, the initial feedback that I'm hearing relative to the middle school, Turkey Hill, even the primary school has been pretty positive. Teachers are feeling that there's a nice balance of screen time and non-screen time, and check in with kids who are on their remote days. I'm hearing good things about the way the Monday schedule is laying out across the district. I know that that's not the case for all parents at the high school and for all students at the high school. This has been a rocky start, no doubt about it, but it will improve.
I think your start is, frankly, Dr. Burnham, I think your start has been better than expected. And I appreciate everything that you've just said. And I agree with everything that you just said for the most part, with two minor exceptions. The first is, I don't know what they don't know that they don't have. Like that whole thing kind of eludes my understanding. However, I am very familiar with the standard setup in every classroom in LMHS, and it's good, but it wasn't built for the purpose that we're talking about right now. It can certainly be adapted for that purpose. There are things that can be done to make the experience much better and lifelike for people on both sides of the house. And it's not just video. There's this whole audio component where a kid in the classroom asks a question and the kid at home can't hear what the question was and misses out on half of that conversation. And when you're doing that every day for 160 odd days that are left of school, that can get really exhausting over the course of the school year. My reason for harping on this is if there's grant money available, we should be going after it. But there's also unexpended CARES money to the tune of several $100,000 that we're probably not going to take advantage of. And so if there's something that we can do to better that experience, understanding the fact that there's a lot of innovation and experimentation and trial and error and negotiation and all this stuff that needs to go on, that money has got a fuse on it. And I'd really hate to see us miss out on that opportunity. And I'll leave it at that.
And I don't disagree with that. Let me just alert you to the fact that they are becoming aware of what they have access to. They may not be fully aware of everything they have access to. But as an example, when the school was outfitted, when it was open, each classroom was outfitted with a hover cam. Well, it's a cam, but it's also got a microphone in it. And if you position it in the right location, that does now amplify the sound so that kids who are remote can be hearing the dialogue of the kids in the classroom and vice versa. So again, we're troubleshooting as we try these things out. As teachers are encountering, okay, so this is my new challenge today. People who are tech savvy amongst the staff, our IT department, we're starting to troubleshoot these things. We test some things out, and then they start sharing, this is the fix, this is what works. This is how you can move forward. But this is the reason that we need to get some dedicated time to do some PD with them, to explain to them how they can optimally utilize the tools that they have already at their disposal. One of the things that they're asking for now, and I don't fully have my head wrapped around this yet, they're asking for additional monitors. The purpose being that when they screen share, what happens when you screen share. You can't see everybody who's on the meeting. Well, it's the same thing with the classroom. So if they can move one screen to a monitor and keep another screen on their laptop, but I've been advised by the IT department that they do have multiple screens. I don't know exactly what this means because I wasn't able to connect with my IT guru this morning. But that was the information that came back to me when I inquired about the need to purchase additional monitors for the classroom. But again, that's part of that $300 figure per room that the IT director gave me. Now, we may not have to spend the money for additional monitors if I can wrap my head around what this. Teachers have like 3 screens in their classroom. What does that mean exactly? And how do they use them? They may very well have what they need and they don't know it. I don't know it sitting here right now. We are still trying to figure this out. We will figure it out before the money comes to an expiration date. I'm sure that if we figure out what the teachers need in the next couple of weeks and have a conversation with the town manager, if we don't get this additional grant that the IT director is applying for, I'm sure that we can figure something out. I'm sure that we can make some adjustments to the ways in which we had planned to use the grant monies that we do have. This entire year ahead of us, I know that you were on the meeting when I explained this to the school committee. Opening day, I said to the staff that this year we were going to take a ride on the education Space Mountain. Space Mountain is a roller coaster inside a building. You ride in the dark. You can't see what's ahead of you. You can't see what's coming. The dips and twists and turns and drops, you have no idea what's coming your way. All you can do is hang on and do the best you can to make it through the end of the ride and come out the other side. Every step of the way this year, we are going to be taking feedback and pivoting and adjusting and making different decisions about how we're prioritizing the funds that we do have available. Now, at some point, we're going to come to a point, where funds have been expended, and when we find something new that we need to address, we're not going to have a full year's worth of grant monies and budget monies to address concerns that we discover in February, let's say. We're going to do the very best we can. We're trying to get to the bottom of what we need on a daily basis. things seem to be okay, pre-K-8, where personally, I'm really not happy that we're not getting those 329 Chromebooks. We have been told since June, when we placed the order, it was going to be mid-July, then it was late July, then it was early mid-August, then it was late August, then it was mid-September, and then we were hearing October. Well, here's October, and I still have no idea when these devices are coming. That's frustrating to me. For me, I feel like HP is engaging in fraudulent business practice. You don't tell your vendors that you can fill an order when you know you don't have the merchandise to fill the order. But this is not something that's unique to Lunenburg. This is happening in districts across the state, and I would guess across the country. There's lots of frustration along the way. We run into a roadblock like this, not sure when we're getting our 329 Chromebooks. What's the next pivot? What do we need to do? What do we need to adjust to keep it all going? This is going to be the year ahead of us. I don't see it changing. And again, we're going to do the very best we can to keep up with the change with the resources that we do have. But I do expect in the next couple of weeks to have a better handle on what technologies the teachers feel they need, what do we already have that we can provide them with, and what do we need to supplement. And again, I wish I had had these answers for you weeks ago. I would have been happy to provide them for you weeks ago. We're still trying to uncover what we really need. So
Thank you very much.
Hang in
I
a couple
appreciate
of
your
weeks, we should be in a better spot.
Okay.
All right.
Just,
Barry, you got
just
it.
a
Thank you
quick-
for your patience.
yeah,
No
just
problem.
a quick, we'll do, Chris Menard has his hand up. So Chris, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I guess maybe more of a comment. I think it was a good presentation of the current state, and obviously there's all sorts of volatility here. And I think to stay within the budget that was approved earlier this year is commendable, and I do appreciate that. I do kind of share a lot of Peter's concerns on IT, and I do might recommend that you look at IT consultants and other things, because I have like 6 screens on my desk, as well as a TV behind me that I sometimes use. So I can understand why there is a need for that kind of thing. I have maybe comments leading into the next time we meet with you on the budget for next fiscal year. I am interested in what the enrollment numbers, meaning the choice in and choice out, might look like at the end of this experiment, as well as kind of the mass virtual schools, whether we're seeing increase or decrease enrollment in those areas. And again, I'm not looking for an answer today because I know you don't have all the numbers, but that's something I'd be interested in because there's kind of long-term potential implications of those.
Well, I can address that for you right now. We're not seeing any significant shifts in choice out students or students, heading off to mass virtual schools. What we are seeing is an increase, a significant increase. It's almost doubled in the number of students that are homeschooled. And I think that is in part because the school this year, as compared to the spring, we are operating on a school day with a schedule, a structured time, whereas last spring it was not. And I think for a lot of families, they need the flexibility. They can't commit to being able to get their kids on a certain schedule and logged in at a certain time. They need more flexibility than that. So that's the issue. I will tell you this though, the Commissioner of Education is well aware of this particular challenge. And there's an effort amongst the Mass Association of School Superintendents to lobby legislators to consider this. And the thing that's being requested consideration for a hold harmless, so that our monies for FY22 might be based on, let's say, a more stable number from some point last year. So it is something that we're aware of. It is something that we are actively working on, but we're lucky here. We haven't seen a lot of choice out as a result of this situation.
Right. And I'm a big fan of choice, to be honest, for many reasons, but just something expect me to ask again, maybe come the spring. The other one I just have a question on is with the remote learning platforms like the IXL, and I forget the name of the other ones, is as we leave this crisis, is there opportunity in a glass half full kind of sense to say that maybe there's enrichment to the curriculum that come from the experiments we've done on this for courses that maybe you don't typically offer because of low interest in it, but for certain students, it might be something that's might be very valuable to them, some foreign language that's, like Russian or Chinese or whatever it is, or computer science or some of these other things that might be very beneficial to certain students as they progress through. I'd be interested to see if there's some, lessons learned through that could enrich the curriculum and maybe in a way that doesn't cost as much as, hiring a full-time student teacher to deliver it.
We were prepared for that for this year anyway, before COVID. The high school had previously used virtual high school, but we were limited to 25 students having access to the courses through virtual high school. That's just the way the platform works. So we actually had planned to eliminate the use of virtual high school for this school year. And we had selected Eduseer as a different program, a different platform that would allow students to register for courses like you just described for a school year, but also the program can be utilized in ways that virtual high school could not. If we had a student out, let's say for an extended period of time due to a medical condition, we could set them up with Eduseer online courses so that they could continue remotely while they had to be out. Rather than our students going to Fitchburg in the summertime for credit recovery at the high school level, this summer we started our credit recovery program with Eduseer classes. So Eduseer, yes, it's fulfilling a need for us in this particular circumstance that we find ourselves in, but we were prepared to move in that direction even prior. We're just happy that we had already vetted that, and that was the model that we were prepared to work with just in our normal conditions. IXL is new to the high school this year, but we have been using IXL at Turkey Hill and the middle school for the last couple of years. Lexia we have used for several years. iReady is something that's new to us this year. It has the capacity for an assessment module, which that's the ways in which we're using it at the primary for this year. But at the Turkey Hill, in addition to the assessment module, we are also using the curriculum learning modules that they have as well. There may not be a need for us to continue with curriculum modules once we pass through this COVID time, but I do believe that the teachers are going to find that the iReady assessment platform is going to be extremely beneficial. It helps them understand where their students are at and what needs they have so that they can more appropriately meet those needs and close gaps. So there are things that we are using this year that we have been using and we will continue to use. And there are things that we have accessed for the first time this year that we will likely want to continue with. Not everything, but there are tools that our teachers are going to be exposed to using this year that I'm certain that the administrators and the teachers are going to want to continue because they've found it to be beneficial.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Thank you. John, you had your hand up?
I did. Thank you, Terry. This is on PPE. Wanted to ask whether PPE was we should consider to be a consumable, or some, say like a capital expense that goes for a longer time, or sort of some blend.
I've
Basically,
identified it as a supply. It's so it is a disposable supply. We've it just the nature of the gowns and our gloves and masks and sanitizer. We're identifying that not as a capital expense, but strictly as a supply commodity.
I suspected that, so that means that in this year into however long this COVID situation lasts, you will be faced with needing to replenish your PPE supply.
Correct.
A similar question with respect to the Chromebooks. What is the anticipated lifespan of a Chromebook?
I'll take a swipe at it and at the answer, but I know Dr. Burnham can correct me. But we recycle our Chromebooks currently. Every freshman student gets a new Chromebook, and they hold it until they're a senior, and then I believe they're recycled back into the middle school. We may have to take a look at that a little bit differently. Once again, it's care and love that our students have to give this equipment. We do have a good we have limited response on damages, though it does happen to students. So I'm estimating between 5 to 6 years we would get a use of a Chromebook. So part of that purchasing plan is included in the local budget every single year.
Okay.
It's part of the school department budget is replacing those Chromebooks.
Thank you.
However, the IT director did say we will have to have a conversation about our intention moving forward as to whether or not we are going to look to maintain the district from pre-K to 12 as a one-to-one. And if that's the case, the number of devices that would have to be turned over, he may be looking to, explore that as a capital expense periodically. So, but we have not had any discussions around the future of the district as a one-to-one from pre-K to 12. Unfortunately, to this point in time, we haven't had the luxury of time to have that conversation. We've been focused on a lot of other things. But there is a possibility that, if we think that it's a wise thing to do and we can make the case to continue in this model, it is possible that we would be looking to transition replacement to a capital expense.
Yeah, we've had conversations around the replacement. So we are buying a number of new Chromebooks this year. So if the average lifespan is 6 years, 6 years from now, we've got a big capital expense to replace whatever we've bought this year. So we are, that may not be a budget impact for next year or even the year after that, but sooner or later, that may, if we go to the one-to-one model, as the superintendent said, that may creep in to an increased budget at the school department to replace those items.
Let me rephrase that to make sure I understand the implications of that. If it becomes a more ubiquitous tool for the students, then it seems to me to be a capital expenditure that mimics an annual operating expense, because you'll have a routine annual replenishment. Would that be correct?
It may not need to be an annual capital expense. Like Mr. Cassidy just indicated, we just invested in many, many devices this year. They have a lifespan. When that bulk comes due to be replaced, we're probably talking about a capital expense. Mr. Malandrinos has been really good about setting up a replacement cycle, and that's part of our budgeting.
Okay.
Yeah, and I actually, John, I'm going to say that it would probably work much like it does with the replacement of police vehicles.
Ah,
That, you know, if you're on a replacement cycle, that, you know, you've got a big bump somewhere. And I was also just going to say that as far as the COVID stuff goes, the only thing that I could imagine that would show up as a capital expense would be if we happened to be in a situation where the buildings were suitable for putting in, like, the ultraviolet filters in the air systems. And I know that there are some places that ran into that that gets expensive per unit, per air handling unit. But are there more questions for the superintendent and Mr. Cassidy? All right, then basically, thank you very much for coming and going through that with us. We do appreciate it. It certainly gives us a better sense of what's going on over in your neck of the woods, where we know everything's crazy. We get it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
And really,
Thank you both.
yeah, we wish you great luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, moving on to the next agenda item, we're going to go over the town manager's report.
Hello, everyone.
And she's still here.
I'm still here. So do you want to start with the budget updates with the adjustments worksheet I sent out?
Okay. The budget adjustments. The adjustments to the FY21 budget for a special town meeting, that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, can you see my screen?
I just see the list of documents right now.
Really?
Yes.
yeah.
Did you double click?
I don't know what I did. All I know is I'm looking at adjustments from ATM, so I don't know.
Oh, we're just
let me-
seeing your,
I'm sorry?
what we see is your laptop. It says
Oh,
adjustments.
you know why?
FYI,
Because
but
it's in the,
you have,
Okay.
yeah.
it keeps going to the browser, so I wonder if that's what it's doing. It's not opening it from my downloads folder.
Oh,
Because I don't have PDF. All right, so let me turn this over to somebody who I don't have PDF on my
Have it
computer.
open if you want to transfer it to me. That's fine.
I'll be happy to.
Mhm.
I'm just so happy to share. All right, Heather. Okay, you have it. And I am happy to report that I don't have anything untoward in my computer at the time. Okay.
Okay. So this is update from last meeting. Our new growth was certified on October 1st at $308,732. So this was a difference of $135,332, more than our annual town meeting estimate. So that was great news. Sue Byrne, the new principal assessor, she's doing a terrific job. She picked up some properties that were not included in that estimate. So that increased our revenue base. Looking at on the expenditure side, I have those numbers for the health insurance. Those are actual numbers. So I had estimated 50,000 on the town side. It's actually 57,871. And on the school side, I estimated 118, and the actual is 115,544. So that number for the schools just being reallocated within their budget. So that's a wash. The cost of the additional police officer I had previously provided, as well as the additional firefighter. Cost for the additional hours of the Board of Health for January through June. This will be needed right now. The Board of Health administrative assistant is working extra hours beyond her normal hours, but it's being funded out of COVID CARES money. So when that goes away in December, we anticipate there's still going to be that need. The additional cost for PPE beyond the CARES end of the CARES money is estimated around $9,000. Additional cleaning costs for town buildings for the second half of the year is $24,000. Additional IT costs for the second half of the year is $11,745. The total of the deferred capital projects that were deferred at the annual town meeting is $494,333. As it notes, this does not include a project for the trackless piece of equipment that was included was part of the capital plan for fiscal 21, as that's being paid for out of Chapter 90 funds. It adds back in the deferred ADA public rights of way improvements for $27,000, the deposit into the OPEB trust fund for $110,000. The state released the assessments, and our estimate was $45,931 more than it actually was. So that's affects the bottom line, and that leaves $546,576 remaining that can be appropriated, which my recommendation would be to deposit those into the 2 different stabilization accounts. Are there any questions?
When you say 2 different stabilization accounts, which ones are you talking about?
The regular stabilization fund and the special purpose stabilization fund. That would be for the special purposes for capital projects.
And then basically, are there any items on the special town meeting warrant that could potentially be requiring funding?
There are the green communities. They submitted an article for the purchase of the streetlights, and that's around $92,000, I think. That article, as well as there is a right of first refusal if right now there's a proposal to that the purchasers of that property would donate a piece to conservation and open space, so we wouldn't have to exercise the right to purchase, but that purchase price is $50,000. And the 2 union articles, those would be within our budget and be taken out of the salary reserve account. So there would be no need to amend the budget for those 2 articles.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And that's basically all of the deferred FY21 capital plan projects are back in.
Yes, minus
Okay.
the trackless.
Okay.
Why is the money for the track list? What's the justification for taking that out of the Chapter 90 fund?
I'm sorry, why is it?
Yeah, what's the justification for using the Chapter 90 funds to purchase the track list? I don't recall us using Chapter 90 funds to purchase a piece of equipment. And how is that going to affect how many roads we can pave?
There is well more than sufficient money in Chapter 90 for our roads. And it's an allowable use of Chapter 90 funds, and that piece of equipment was out of service. And if we had to wait till town meeting, it would be too delayed for when we would need it for the snow season.
But we have a surplus in capital.
I'm sorry, we have.
Well, I guess then the
Don't we
question
have a surplus?
becomes, so then does the question then become, all right, so at this point, you've made that $170,000 encumbrance currently, so that's why you're taking it out of operating, because that was available to you. Is there any need, or are we just projecting that we don't need to put it back into any road work or any other use of Chapter 90 funds to replenish that amount from capital?
No, so this is reducing the amount we're requesting from capital by 170,000. Chapter 90 is not appropriated at town meeting. It's funding directly that we receive from the state, that once those expenses are submitted, we get reimbursed from the state for, but we get an allocation each year for Chapter 90.
How much is that?
This year was around, I think it was 450,000, around there.
Chapter 90 is not listed as a revenue source
It's
in the
not,
omnibus budget.
it's not an appropriation at town meeting.
Well, I understand that it's not an appropriation, but the money is a revenue source that we then appropriate as part of the public works budget. Is that not a correct description of what we do with that?
It's used to pay for road projects outside of the operating budget, as well as we have a line item within the operating budget for roads. Is that what you're getting to?
Well, we rely mostly on the Chapter 90 funds for paving, don't we?
No. We have our budget too for roads.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Karen, thank you.
No.
Hallelujah. The Chapter 90 funds are treated as a grant fund, and they're totally separate from the operating budget. In the general highway maintenance budget, there's a line item that we have been funding over the years and increasing incrementally by $50,000 for pavement as well. And then the other source of funding that we obviously have right now for pavement management is the $4 million debt exclusion. So to answer Peter's question, the Chapter 90 funds are totally outside of the budget. I mean, they are included in the funds that we have available for pavement management, but they're not part of our operating budget at all.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it, and I don't know if this is what Jay was getting to, but I feel a little uneasy with the fact that we're on this pavement management path. We've made a pledge to continue to increase the funding for pavement management on an annual basis, yet there seems to be more money than we need in our available for paving roads. Right now it's feeling like it's not washing, but it's already 8:30, so it's past my bedtime.
The debt exclusion, the $4 million debt exclusion is already dedicated. The roads are already dedicated to that. How much of the Chapter 90 funds do we expend the whole amount every year, the $450,000? And that amount varies, doesn't it?
We're able to carry forward Chapter 90 funds. Karen,
How much, but do we expend it every year,
the full amount?
the full amount?
I would have to go back and historically to see what the expenditures out of that were, Karen.
I would as well. I mean, the funds roll over. You don't lose the use of the funds that you get for Chapter 90.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the amount we spend out of Chapter 90 is probably different every year. I would say probably typically it might be in the $300,000 to $400,000 range, but I can definitely get you some historical data on that. I don't have that information because my laptop is at work, which is why I'm on my phone.
So not to beat a dead horse on this, but maybe to beat a dead horse. Town meeting voted on our collective, well, on your collective recommendation to defer a whole bunch of capital items to the next town meeting.
Mhm.
And it appears as if, and perhaps I'm characterizing this wrong, somebody made the decision to go ahead and do it anyway.
To purchase that piece of equipment?
Yes.
Yes, because we were out of service of that piece of equipment. But it's an acceptable use of those funds to purchase a piece of equipment.
Who made that decision?
Between myself and the DPW director.
But that, I don't believe that's something that we've normally done.
It hasn't historically been done. It's been used on road projects, but doesn't mean it's not allowable.
Okay. Basically not to, I don't know if there's a need to belabor it at this point. I think there will be questions at special town meeting regarding it, and I think it would be, basically, be good to figure out if there was another reason or another. I guess I don't understand enough then about how the Chapter 90 funds work, because I just assumed that everything was working towards the pavement management plan, and understanding that there's obviously, in order to accomplish the road work, that piece of equipment was required, and you had an avenue to do that. I guess I was just wondering whether or not the $170,000 in those funds doesn't have to be spent on something else, which it sounds like it doesn't, because it'll just be pushed forward. But if there was a situation where that $170,000 could have been used on, or should have been used on, a pavement plan for this year, there would be any consideration towards putting that back from the current surplus. But I don't know whether or not, given the type of work that's being scheduled for the spring, if you would be able to spend enough money to do the pavement, do more pavement, or have the access to the contractors who would be doing that. Because I know that one of the other issues that has come up, well, not an issue, is that there's been significant savings in the cost of doing the pavement for a number of reasons. One of them is that, we have our contractors are so local. But it's an interesting question, but I think that's what the question would be is if your folks aren't seeing a need to put that $170,000 back to work.
I got to tell you, I'm a little bit bewildered by this. I mean, I've sat here now for a year and a half and been lectured by the DPW director about dollars in and dollars out and Chapter 90 and upping the funds and all this kind of stuff. And two people just went and made a decision to spend $170,000 on a piece of equipment that I thought was going into pavement. And I understand it's equipment to lay down pavement, but this is a this is a major end item, a major capital item that is the purview of town meeting to make that decision. At least that's my understanding of how our town government works.
That's Chapter 90 fund doesn't get approval by town meeting.
Does the Board of Selectmen know that you made this decision?
They've received these updates about the track list.
Okay.
I think what is missing here is what would happen if we were without this piece of equipment.
I can pretty much imagine, Mrs. Lemieux. I'm not questioning. I'm not questioning the need. I'm questioning the process and the how we make decisions as a government. This is a major decision that, to my knowledge, nobody was aware of.
That's the board did receive these updates.
Was it discussed in a selectmen's meeting?
When I gave my budget update.
I think that, well, I mean, and that would be, a question for, the in terms of how it's accessed and who has the capacity, the responsibility, the authority to make that kind of a call. I mean, clearly, that could be, that's pretty clear in the sense that that's, if Chapter 90 funds are not a town meeting thing, then that's one thing. So, but again, for me, and I agree with you, Peter, that, like, having heard from the DPW director in terms of making sure that we have the money available for the roads and doing that $50,000 a year match to bring it up to a number to maintain our roads at a certain level. I'm just, like, looking at it thinking that, is that something that should be or could be, or is it just that you don't anticipate you'll be able to spend in the spring in order to proceed ahead with, or even move ahead with the pavement management? I certainly understand the need, to get the equipment and to get the equipment in a timely manner. I don't really, like when you're buying big equipment, I don't know what timely really is. And frankly, I don't know what a trackless is. So, it wouldn't jump out at me. And then, certainly there's other things that do come up around that stuff. But it is an interesting question regarding procedures. But I also think it's true that when there's a capital plan put together, but Senator Tran comes to the town and says, "Oh, we might be able to apply grant funds instead." Those grant funds could just as easily be used to buy the trackless. They could have been used, like on that situation. So, and that becomes a whole different revenue, just a different revenue stream or revenue source. But that would just be my take as, like as somebody who writes budgets. But certainly again, to me, it's just, are we losing anything by having diverted those funds? And if we're not losing anything by having diverted those funds, which it sounds like sometimes we carry those funds forward anyway,
We do.
I'm not as concerned. But I just think it'll be a question that will come up.
How much money is currently in Chapter 90?
Karen we'll have to look up that.
Yeah.
I don't have that information, but I can get that from you from our DPW clerk.
I mean, I think one thing just from a budgeting perspective that I didn't understand until tonight, and perhaps just it's the way that we've dealt with Chapter 90 in the past, is that this is effectively a revolving fund that is managed separate from the town money that goes into pavement. And if that's the case, then I'd like some oversight of that and at least be made aware of exactly what's in those funds and how are those funds being allocated on an annualized basis as we're laying down pavement. Because I've sat through three of these briefings, and none of that was made clear to me, or perhaps I just missed it or didn't understand it.
Yeah, and said another way, that the existence of the Chapter 90 funds and the amount in the account could change the way you recommend other budgetary items through the annual process.
Exactly right. Yeah.
So the other question I had, which is much less money, but the additional IT costs of almost 12,000, is that personnel, equipment, licenses, or some combination of the three?
That's the remote meeting coordinator.
So it's personnel.
Personnel.
Okay.
So there was some
I'm sorry.
there was some
I was
confusion
wondering-
on this last week around whether this was school department money or town. So this is town money, not school department money, that will be applied in the second half.
That's town. Yes.
Okay.
We know
Dave,
the
you have your
school
hand
will
up?
be utilizing the position
Yeah.
as well, but probably a much smaller amount because just the number of their meetings compared to the number of town meetings.
Dave, you still?
Dave, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Shut the microphone off just to make sure. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to go back to the track list for a couple of minutes. When the purchase of the track list was deferred, there was a statement made that there was a process in progress to determine the number to repair the existing piece of equipment that we own. Did that ever come through? And was it not feasible to repair that piece of equipment? So that's why it was such a rush to move to find a funding source for this equipment, or did that process never get followed through on?
I believe the mechanic did follow through on that process. I think it was a timing issue as well.
That doesn't answer the question, though. Did a number come through that didn't make sense to repair it, or did it just, we don't have time to deal with it, we're going to buy a new one?
I can't remember for sure, so I'd have to check.
Okay, I'd like to have an answer to that, only because I want to have the historical knowledge of how this all went down. Secondly, going back to the articles that are going to need funding at special town meeting. At the last minute on the Springtown meeting on the article for streetlights, a dollar amount was attached to that article of, I believe it was going to be stated and moved onto the floor as an expenditure up to $100,000 to make sure there was enough funding to cover whatever the new number was to purchase the streetlights. Are we going to do that again? And are you going to recommend a funding source?
The Board of Selectmen hasn't discussed it as far as the article itself yet. So I don't know what their position will be. And as far as funding source, it would have to be raise and appropriation, because that's the available funding source.
So we've lost our opportunity for unappropriated funds to be cover
No,
cover this expense.
no.
Okay.
That is on unappropriated funds.
What was the source that we identified when we came up with the dollars? Was it unappropriated free cash?
It was free cash.
Right. Okay. Now, is that still available to be appropriated for this purpose?
Closes out at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. So now we've moved into 2021 budgetary money to fund it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and hopefully we don't do an up to 100,000 based on the information that Jay was presenting that said that they were really overstating the cost. So.
Yeah, well, the issue is, though, that if you don't have a real number and you don't fund it high enough, then you're dead in the water. Yep. I agree. I don't disagree with that premise, because if you appropriate $120,000, they'll come up with $119,999 number.
Yeah.
Right.
For the cost. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or anything on this?
Yeah, can I have one go back? When we go through the budget process, and again, I'll make this more towards the spring, do we usually present the amounts in all the various revolving funds and chapter funds and all the other sources as part of that process?
No.
The revolving funds are just basic. Well, the revolving funds are usually just put up in terms of what the amount is that they're going to be looking to put into the accounts, and then whatever goes in and comes out. But the chapter money, the chapter money the Chapter 90 funds are not sitting in on the revenue side. They don't sit in that whole state. Okay. All right. How many other accounts are there that don't sit in that? Are there any? Or is Chapter 90 special?
there are a lot of, I mean, on the school side, they have, I can give you a schedule that will show you as of the close of FY20 what all the special revenue funds were that we had and what the balances are. I mean, it'll include grant funds, basically anything that's outside of the budget. But I can give you a schedule that will show you that information for the close of FY20.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, so you have the, whatever that's called that Chris set up so that we could share files, right?
OneDrive.
We can just put it in.
Dave Passios, could I ask a question of Karen through you? I've been trying to, as the chair of Parks, has been trying to pin down exactly how Parks incoming revenue is handled. Can I assume that it is one of those revenue accounts that you just spoke of because it's not a revolving account?
No, it's a revolving account.
It's not officially according to the state. It is not listed as a revolving account in the town of Lunenburg. I went through that with town council.
Well, I'm not sure what they're talking about because we've had a revolving account for the park department since I started working for the town of Lunenburg. So I'm not sure, but we can check on that. But I can tell you that it gets reported to the state on everything that I do as a special revenue fund for the park department.
Okay, so it's a special revenue fund. It's not a revolving account.
Well, it's still it's a revolving account, meaning that the balance rolls from year to year.
Okay, we'll have some more discussion about it in the future. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The semantics of accounting are so much fun. Okay.
Well, the other end of it is more of a concern than it is the incoming side. It's the outgoing side, but
Sure.
That's for future discussion. Thank you.
Sure. Do you want to move on then to the other slide presentation that you had, Heather?
So for the capital you're talking about, or?
Oh, can I just ask one more question? I'm sorry. I got so wound up about chapter 90. I had another question. I'm sorry. Can you just briefly explain the difference between the new growth projection and the new growth, the certified new growth? I'm assuming that's last year's new growth versus this year's. Why is that two separate lines?
So right here.
Yeah.
I just separated out by when I had told you initially, we changed it to 250. Before it was certified, the principal assessor gave me a new estimate of 250. And then when it was
so this is just
submitted,
a historical. This is just a historical accounting. Yeah. Okay, got it. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
Welcome.
Oh yeah, and actually that was I know you guys had trouble understanding what I meant by history of the budget development history. Basically, I had just hoped to go through the budget from when it was initially presented to what we took out, what we took out, what we took out, and what we were putting back. That was all I meant by that. So I knew you guys.
No, and this is the right way to do it. This is exactly what I asked for last winter. Sure. When I needed a chronology. So thank you.
Yep.
All right. That.
All right, and actually, if you guys could lower your hands so that I don't think that you're still asking. Oh, Chris Menard put his up. Okay. Thank you.
Barry, do you have the PowerPoint open? I don't. That one.
I don't know what's going to happen if I try to open it because it's a PDF. So I don't know if I can. I think it's going to. It's going back to the cloud, so I'm not sure that I can do it.
Yes, I don't have it.
Does anybody else have it that has Adobe on their computer that can take the deferred capital plan project. Heather sent it out today. Was it today or, well, actually you sent so many things out, I'm not sure when that one came.
That was just a recap for, did you want to go over all of that or
I
just?
mean, we can go over it quickly. I mean, basically, there's probably no reason to go over anything other than what it looks like is. Have you got it? Okay. So I think basically, if you can skip through most of the slide stuff and just go to the deferred and what's going back in. We don't have to go through the whole thing.
All right. You need to give me sharing capability.
You got it.
Okay. Screen 3.
Gee, all these multi-screen people.
Chris isn't kidding. It's the only way to work when you're doing this from home every day. Okay. I'm not sure I'm on the right slide or the right presentation for that matter. So
It seems like the right presentation. I don't know what page we want to be on.
Yeah.
well, let's go back to the top.
Yeah. If you want to skip down
Can that
what
be
the
enlarged?
actual projects were.
Thank you.
So this, keep going, please. Those are the total projects that we received requests for, the 4,239,000. That slide just depicts the original capital plan as recommended back in January of 2020, pre-COVID. Can you make the screen bigger?
Make it bigger.
I think the problem is it's a PDF and not a.
Yeah. That's as big as it gets.
Okay, that's better.
Okay.
So that total was 1,329,133, and the projects funded at the annual totaled 647,880, and the deferred projects total is 494,333. So that includes, if you keep going, the facilities, that includes the public safety carport reconfiguration, and that's 135. These are just depictions of what it would, that new construction would be. Kitchen remodel at the Ritter building for 12,000. It's the current kitchen.
Who uses that kitchen?
That's all the Ritter building employees. So the land use departments, which includes planning, building department, conservation, Board of Health, the Veterans Office is in that building.
I mean, it's obviously kind of ugly, but I just wonder about pouring money into buildings that, if TC Passios does go forward in the spring, would be potentially vacated or refurbished or something.
Yeah. Well, that's, I think, part of a larger conversation. When that's what I hear a lot is we're in this chicken and egg situation, and where there's concern that we haven't maintained and repaired our buildings because of that situation. What are we going to still be here? Are we moving to a new building? But in the meantime, they're falling in disrepair. So
I guess my only comment on that is it seems like we're driving towards a decision point in the spring of next year. You know, this and the other 25,000, could those be deferred until the spring?
Actually, I would say that even if the Passios does move forward, it's still like several years away. And quite frankly, we've been working on moving out of the Ritter since I joined the finance committee.
Well before.
Yeah. Yep. So, there's nothing in the bank. I mean, you make a good point that in terms of, like trying to do the renovation, but to not do the renovation and still have, again, like one of my first town meetings, they were going to, the Ritter actually was renovated for office space and town hall was not, because the group that was there before lunch voted to approve the renovations to the Ritter, but left after lunch, and the town hall was voted down. So it's kind of, that one's a tough call, but I would be interested to hear from the capital plan committee in terms of why they prioritized this one. So, and I'd be happy to go along with whatever their recommendation was, but I'm not sure I trust that we're really going anywhere on Casio's anytime soon. Dave?
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce what you just said. I was going to if you didn't. I do agree. In my head, even if the process goes forward with the present timeline, I think you're looking at 3 years before RIT is vacated. It may be a little sooner than that, but we've got to get through the rest of the design phase. We've got to get town meeting to fund the project. And then we have to go into, if we go forward with this whole building renovation, it's going to be a phased renovation. And my guess is, and I don't know this for sure, but running it through my head, with what's in the building now, the first or town offices may be the last wing that works into that phase type of renovation. I don't know that for sure, but just being able to move the educational programs around from where they are now to where they will be after the renovations, it makes sense to, I believe, personally, to start in the back wing and work our way forward. That way you move the programs that are not in that wing right now, or you move them to the front wing and you get the back wing renovated to where they're going to be permanently, move them back there, and then town office wing gets renovated. So they may be the last move in. But that's only my personal thought process, no one else's.
My view on
And
this is it's kind of, the space is kind of gross. And we should be taking, if we think our employees are going to be in there for 2 or 3 more years for $12,000, we hear a lot about, being a good employer. And some of that, I think, to a certain extent is probably overblown. But I think something like this is a good example of not being a good employer, particularly if we choose not to do it. I think we should do this.
So the only thing I'll say is this says replace cabinets and sinks. It doesn't say repair the ceiling and make the walls not look like they were hacked together. So what is being done here?
It will include that as well. So that should be amended.
Okay.
Just be aware also that the water problems from the gutters and stuff are what caused this area to be really pretty nasty. And what you see that as looks out ripped out walls, that was because of pending mold from the water damage.
Yeah,
so
I will say,
the walls were ripped out but not replaced.
Just has the capital planning committee met, or are they planning to meet in advance of the special town meeting?
Their next meeting is October 20th.
Okay.
And this project was vetted in the priority list from, the previous capital planning committee.
Yes.
Right.
But they're not meeting until the 20th, and we're going to be making a recommendation on this next week. So for whatever that's worth.
Well, I think basically, yeah. And when we talk about it, I think that we never got to the point of making a recommendation on the capital plan before it started getting deferred, right? We just made it based on the deferral.
Yeah.
I'm just going back to what we talked about in the spring. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Heather. I don't mean to keep you here until 12 hours.
Scroll down. So other facilities is remodel at the senior Eagle House for $22,000. The library carpet that would replace it into carpet squares. That's $126,000. Design for an ADA compliant ramp at the Ritter Building. That cost is $25,500. A parking lot at the North Cemetery for $20,000. And
On the, a quick question on the library, that includes moving all the books and
yes,
all of those funds as well?
yep.
Yeah, I think they learned from the last one.
Yeah, that was the last problem.
The DPW, a dump truck with a plow, and that request is for $58,833. This replaces the 2006, which would be transferred to the school to replace their 2000 dump truck. So as we move through dump trucks, they're handed down to the school department for their on-site. And
Cycle.
that worked well.
You can
Is the
buy a
old
dump truck for
being-
58,000?
That's what we just received an updated quote, and that held. Yes.
Dump trucks are cheaper than cruisers.
Mhm.
Is the old dump truck being traded in?
No, the old dump truck would be transferred down to the school department.
Yeah, the school department dump truck, is that being traded in?
Oh, no,
That's-
it's pretty
That's
much,
scrap metal.
yeah, done.
Oh, I
20 years
thought Parks
old.
and Recreation, I thought the Parks Commission wanted that for hay rides and stuff.
We could,
No, we want 100,000 back from pavement management.
it could be
I had to get that in tonight.
the school could put it on municipal bid and get whatever they can for it, though. They
I'll
could do
give them
that.
$75 for it.
Well, it'll be gone though, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. It is
Right.
seriously in that bad condition.
We don't want to hang it
Well, I
around.
would think, yeah, 20-year-old dump truck, I would expect
Yeah.
would be by now.
Yep.
The
Police capital.
police, this is the second cruiser. One cruiser was funded at the annual town meeting. This is for the second cruiser.
Heather, how soon will that need for this second cruiser? Because I understand what triggered it and why it was held off. Is the hiring of the police officer going to be in unison with the arrival of this cruiser?
So this cruiser actually, and the acting chief is gonna re-examine the cruiser replacement, but this cruiser was marked for the canine officer, I guess, but he's gonna relook at the overall plan and to see if that's still gonna be the case.
I thought we deferred this cruiser because it wasn't needed because we weren't
No.
adding an additional.
That's not what happened, Dave. We thought that was the case, and then Chief Marino at the time came and explained that it was actually the one that we bought was new stock, and they deferred the replacement because they had deferred previously, and they had two guys coming out of the academy. This is a replacement cruiser.
Okay, I guess I missed that conversation.
Yeah, it came up right before last town meeting because we were all confused by it, but we had flipped the bid on it.
Okay, thank you.
If you can go down. And the school capital project for the AC at the Turkey Hill Elementary School admin area for 28,000. And that's all the projects.
Is that it? Yeah.
Yes.
Heather, did the engineering for the primary school AC, that was approved in
At the
Springtown meeting?
annual. Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was still in there. Okay.
Okay, any other questions on any of that? I will say, Jim Marino had commented in chat, and I'd be happy to recognize Jim if he wants to actually make the comment out loud. There he goes. Thank you, Jim. I'm not gonna be able to not call you chief, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's quite all right.
Okay.
I heard some of the conversation about the Chapter 90 funds, and in defense of that, I would say, and it says, as it says in the chat screen, that essentially what Karen said, it's grant money and it can be used for this type of equipment. And I was fully aware that this was going on. Chapter 90 funds are typically used for supporting pavement management plans, although supplementing them, although it can be used for paving. The problem is the amount of money that you get out of Chapter 90 really doesn't give you a significant amount of paving. It's better used for the preparation of the paving and so forth. And that's typically what it's used for. You can use it for landscaping on the side of the road, intersection approaches, that sort of thing. So essentially it supports it. And that type of purchase is always been approved by the state. That's not unusual at all. They needed that piece of equipment. It went down. And from my understanding is, to answer that other question, is that the other one couldn't be repaired without spending a ton of dough on it. So, and I guess getting parts, I think, was an issue too, but don't quote me on that. I seem to remember that conversation with the mechanic. I actually talked to him myself. Not specifically about that subject, it just happened to come up one day. So, I got this tone, this like conspiratorial tone, and it's there's none of that. I at least was well aware of it. I'm not going to speak for the other members, but it was brought to our attention. And as I said, having been here in town government for 40 odd years, I know this has happened many times in the past. Not so much, I guess, with Lunenburg, but I know that funding is used for that sort of thing. The other funding, as I said, is used mostly for supporting the pavement management plan. So it kind of sounds like you got money that you didn't spend on pavement, but essentially you did. It was just for all of the other jobs that are associated with the paving. That's my understanding of it. And I think if you look into it, that's what you're going to find.
Can Chapter 90 be used for parking lots, paving parking lots?
Well, it can be used for projects in some cases. I don't know that specifically, but if you can get approval from the state, yes, they will approve certain projects. I don't know what the criteria is, to be honest.
I don't question the legality here, Chief, because I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and I don't understand, all the ins and outs of all this grant stuff. But you mentioned you've been in town government for 40 years. Do you recall ever purchasing anything over $100,000 without finance committee and/or town meeting approval?
Well, I can't say that I do. But as I said, with grant money, typically, where we receive this money for certain purposes, and that's what we spend it for. Do we, obviously we make people aware in town government that that's what we're doing, and that's what was done here tonight, and that was what was done last Tuesday night, I believe it was, at the selectmen's meeting. So yeah, it sounds like I get what you're saying, Pete. It sounds like a lot of money. So I understand that piece of it. I just don't want you to think that money was not spent on pavement that could have been spent on pavement. Essentially, it is. And this, notwithstanding this piece of equipment, which is related to that, related to road use. That's what it needs to be spent on. So I get where you're coming from. Sounds like a lot of money, but it's the sticker shock.
Well, it is a lot of money.
It's sticker shock, I guess, is what it is. But
Well, if it was in my pocket, I would be happy.
well, so would not. But it definitely isn't.
I think a budget should be pulled together with a holistic view of all the accounts and revenues and grants and everything else to the extent possible. So I think that's something else that we should look at going forward.
I think that's something we should shoot for.
Well, in some cases such as this, when you got to buy something right away and they're telling you, it might be 3 or 4 months out and snow's coming and you need it for that purpose, it may be a little difficult. It's not like, it's not like it was hidden from anybody. That's why the town manager's here telling you about it tonight. She told us about it. It's, it was one of those cases where it's like do or die. And believe me, come winter, if they didn't have that piece of equipment, I think you'd be criticizing whoever's running the DPW at the time that you didn't have it.
Yeah, I don't want to come across that I'm criticizing the decision. I'm just,
Oh, no, I know you weren't. I'm just saying, I think that's what would happen down the road if we didn't have this piece of equipment once the snow flies. And from what I understand, we're going to have a tough winter, so we're going to need it.
yeah, again, my only thing was that if chapter 90 has a line and then the funding, the pavement management has another line that we do vote for in the budget, we should be looking at it holistically is kind of my thought on it.
No, I get it. Yeah. And it seems like you don't have control. I get that over this, but a lot of cases, I mean, I don't think I've ever gotten a grant that big, but we get grants and we get grants for specific reasons and we spend the money. And I mean, I hope I've been transparent about telling everybody about what I spend money on, but sometimes you're in a hurry and you got to buy something in a hurry and to make, things work. This whole thing is because of the amount. I think it's just shocking, probably.
Well, I think the other thing is that what makes this a little bit different is that it was planned for in the capital plan, which is an interesting thing because like on the other hand, you have maybe it didn't have to be in the capital plan because there was a potential another funding source, which is just something that we've just never talked about or even considered that was a possibility. So it's kind of because it was, and it was great that the town was planning on and recognizing that this thing was about to go and it was an important piece of equipment. Let's put it in the capital plan. And that's really why it's called out, I think. And it also has happened that we've had the capital plan and we've had, like all of a sudden the state legislature come up with some grant money for stuff that we were able to supplement the capital plan, which was great. And this is just one of those things, but not understanding that there's this pot over here. I think that's where we're coming from. It's just like, oh, okay, so that's how that's used. Because basically my understanding had always been that we were trying to get the money put together so that we had a particular pile of money to support maintaining the roads at that level. And again, obviously, I don't know what's involved with that. Still don't know what a trackless is. You can tell me what it does, but I wouldn't. And that's one of the nice things about one of the budget documents that Chris shared with us in the files. Like one of the things I really liked about their capital plan presentation was they had pictures of the equipment. And it was, oh, that's what that is.
Yeah.
And then an explanation of what it was used to do. And I think, and that might be something that's worth taking a look at down the road too. But yeah, no, I'm fine with it. And I think, but having that information again and Karen providing that kind of a schedule so that we can see what's coming and going and how it's coming and going would be helpful. Dave?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that capital planning has already had a conversation about keying in on alternative funding for some of these capital requests, and that we're going to take a much stronger look when we're prioritizing next year's capital list with that in mind, so that something like this might get bumped down the list a little bit further if you've got alternative funding sources, so that it does push the push something like this into another funding source if it's available, because we've always got more capital projects than we've got dollars for. To the point here, I think part of it with Peter is that, we've committed $170,000 worth of capital money that could have been committed to something else that is just as equal in need, if not a higher need. But it was pushed towards this when there was obviously other funding available for it. So I personally on the capital planning committee will be taking that into consideration when I set up my personal prioritization for next year.
Oh, all I know is that basically, and Chief, you may be the only person here who might remember this whole conversation, but I just think that, Jack could have gone there for the street sweeper and never faced all of that shout down that he got. So
yeah,
that seems appropriate. But that's
But was there
that's me
funds in there?
taking the,
Was there a lot of money
I'm
back
sorry?
then?
Well, maybe not too. And those funds are different every year, I believe.
Yeah.
Don't quote
Right.
me on that, but that's my record.
No, there probably wasn't money then. It was just basically, that was just me. I mean, I can't remember one piece of equipment taking as much conversation as the street sweeper did. And I think, what was it, a $13,000 piece of equipment or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right, so moving. I'm sorry?
180.
Was it
Yeah,
180?
Yeah,
it
was it-
wasn't
Yeah.
cheap.
It was a big piece of equipment, but who knows if the money was there?
Yeah, really. No, it wasn't.
But that's been the issue. Nobody takes the extra look. I mean, the fuel tanks, we had to, and Jimmy, this is nothing against you. But we
Sure.
as a couple of citizens had to push back really hard on this underground fuel tank change out,
Yeah.
get a second look made at alternative funding sources. They were not looked at all before the money was gone after at town meeting, and the subsequent additional funding a year later.
Well, the great learning experiences all the way through. So
Yep,
by
definitely.
the time I finally retire from the like finance committee, I'll know what we're doing. Okay, so
No, it's time to retire.
I'm sorry.
I said, then you know it's time to retire.
The agenda. Back to the agenda. All right. So basically, if there's no, do we want to take a look? Actually, we got copies of the special town meeting warrant articles, the draft. Is there anything in there that people wanted to go through? I don't necessarily want to go through them one by one. I'm just dreading next week when we do the public hearing. But I think a lot of them will just be tied to the budget. I don't know why we're doing a bylaw that night, but I don't know if we'll still have, it'll be interesting to see if we still have a quorum by the time we get to the bylaw, but
I was interested in a couple questions on the TIF, on letter O.
Oh, okay. All right. So Heather, would you be able to go over the TIF?
Yes.
Is that
yeah.
a regular?
I
Is that a
think
regular document or is that
I
a
sent
PDF
out
too?
that document today.
Yep.
Who's host right now, Terry? I can try to.
Yes.
You want to put it up on the
Is it a
screen?
PDF? Yeah, I'm going to give it back to you. Okay.
PDF.
You know, there are free PDF readers, Terry. We could set you up.
You know,
Come on.
as it is, I have to get a new computer just so I don't have to use my phone for a speaker and microphone. I am by my nature.
For some reason, I don't have this one.
Where
Which
are
one are we
you?
going over? 10? Wait, are we going over? Which number?
Oh,
Or letter?
I'm sorry, Heather. It took me a while to find you. You moved on my part.
Let's see.
It was just in one of the emails that Heather sent out. There were two documents.
No, I
One was
got
the-
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I found it.
One. Okay, so
Nope.
this was presented to the board Tuesday night for a 10-year tax increment financing agreement. There's, I don't know if anyone's been following, a company called Bright Farms is looking to develop
Yep.
the land behind Walmart and Hannaford's to do a major greenhouse project. So they initially came back in July to the board to discuss the project, that they were interested in doing a tax increment financing agreement. Their initial investment will be $10 million in the building. And so this, if anyone knows anything about TIFs, you feel free to stop me. But so with a TIF, you don't lose the property assessment as it stands right now. So the base, that value, we still receive what we receive now and incrementally over the term of the TIF. It's the incremental value that the investment is that we're giving a discount on over the term of the TIF. So the proposal is it would be 100% discount on the incremental value in year one, and it would decrease over the term of the agreement to the point where it would be fully taxed at the end of the 10th year. Any questions on that?
Yeah, so the $996,000 savings
Yes.
to the company, we never see that money on a $10 million piece of property.
That we would not see that. That's what they're getting discounted on their taxes total over the term of the 10 years. And this is just a demonstration. It's using certain assumptions, which obviously will change. This uses the tax rate as it currently stands, the $18.12. It doesn't account for any inflation or change in value. That's to be determined by the assessor.
So
those
we'd
are
be
the
voting,
assumptions used.
we'd be
just in
voting on basically the discount,
Yes.
not the tax rate or the value of the property, just the discount.
Correct. Right.
So do we have any policy regarding TIFs across the?
The town does not. No. We've had, in my tenure, only one other company approach us for a TIF, and it was after the project was built.
And I recall that one as well. So I think lacking when I first heard about this project coming in, and I still am excited for them to come in, there was never any discussion that, they were interested in it if we could get a TIF associated with it. So that's a pretty large, or at least maybe there was and I was unaware of it, but that seems like a pretty large discount to give to a fairly large company at a time when a lot of people in town are struggling, and I understand that they're doing other things, donating land and that sort of thing, but it's certainly not $1 million worth of land. And lacking a policy on this, it seems like we're being generous to a company on the heels of being kind of yelled at on that whole services not rendered, which was much less, and for a bus company that's kind of crucial to services for the town operations. So
Research most. We're looking for initially a 20-year TIF agreement.
Yeah, this is a 10.
And in my research, found most TIF agreements were 10-year agreements. And that's what was modeled after that. What the written TIF agreement will be, just like you said, Peter, would be the number of years, the discount assigned to each year. So year one, 100%, year two, so on. It will also discuss the investment that the company would make, the size of the new construction, as well as the jobs that will be tied to this investment, the added jobs.
Yep.
So, and that would all have to be negotiated with the board, but we could structure it so that we could try to make sure they're Lunenburg area people that the jobs go to first.
So
They
as it stands today, is it when it comes to town meeting, will it come structured as to what it is, or will we be seeking to give authority to the board to enter into a TIF?
Our plan would be to present a proposal.
But ultimately, town meeting gives the authority. You'll offer this information, but it's authority that they give to the Board of Selectmen. Heather,
David,
one
can
other
we-
quick question. This went into the Board of Selectmen's meeting on Tuesday as a 15-year tip and was adjusted there.
No, no.
No, what was that
It was,
discussion?
presented at 10-year, and Selectman Jeffries asked if they could do 8 years
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I had the wrong
with-
numbers. Yep.
with a net revenue, same
Yeah,
revenue. So it would just
net
be
neutral revenue
Yeah.
was what was said. Yes.
revenue neutral.
Yep. Thank you.
Would just be changing in percentages.
Is there
I
a way
think
to
that-
structure the article so that, it limits the top end of what can be negotiated?
What cap? Yeah.
Well, yeah, some kind of cap
Yeah.
on it. I mean, not that I don't trust the Board of Selectmen to do it in our best interest, but
No, that's a good
lacking
idea.
a policy,
Good
I have a hard time in any designation of, economic development committee that no one wants to join. I don't see, why we're pursuing this one necessarily. And again, I'm very supportive of the business coming into town. It seems like a good fit.
Mhm.
Uh,
Right, and it also doesn't, I mean, basically, I'm just assuming that this doesn't take into effect, but would be affecting the bottom line numbers, would be that depreciation would be knocking that $10 million down. And they're not talking about, no.
No, so this is just on the real estate. So the TIF agreement could actually, so they would still pay personal property. That could be structured that way. So would realize the full value of personal property tax.
Okay, so, all right, wait a minute. So the $10 million is reflective of the
land and building, the real estate,
okay.
not the contents.
Okay, so okay, so any of the contents and stuff would still be billed separately and would not be part of this.
Right.
Okay.
And then basically, what effect would this have on new growth to the town?
So the new growth, we wouldn't be able to capture that. It would be added to our value.
But then it would basically, each year that the tax revenues were anticipated to go up, or what we would receive would go up, would it be rolled into new growth at that point?
So that column on the right-hand most side would be the town would receive. Not, and again, this is a depiction of using certain assumptions, so.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. I mean, and actually it is, Chris brought up a couple of really good points in terms of it would be nice to have a policy, because I do remember when someone was looking for assistance after it was done, was it the plastics company? And I know that turned into I mean, it would just help to the town to have some policy set, and it would be really great if the Economic Development Committee could really get going. Because I know that's been a long-term goal of the town, to try to figure out what we wanted in terms of economic growth.
I mean, the problem with a deal like this, or any deal like it is, it's, from our level, it's virtually impossible to determine if this sort of incentive would actually, be the tipping point for the project happening versus not happening, right? It's a difference of if you assume that the project is going to happen over 20 years, it's, give or take $4 million in additional tax revenue, right? But we're going to give back a quarter of that to incentivize it to happen. It's still real money. I mean, $4 million over 20 years is a lot of money. And this is not the kind of development that is going to put a whole lot of stress on town services, right? I mean, very minimal.
Right.
So this is the kind of development, this is good development, this is.
The other piece of that is they're looking to do, this is just phase 1. They're looking to do a second phase of equal value, eventually. So that would be additional tax revenue in that phase too.
And then I guess the other, I mean, and actually this has absolutely nothing to do with finance. But is there any pushback at all from like the Agricultural Commission? I mean, is there potentially any, is this viewed as something, as a competition to currently, current producers in the area?
I don't believe so. I've read about their meetings, and I think they had initial questions that they got answered by the company, which allayed some of their concerns, but that would be best directed to them.
Yeah, I think the model is kind of direct to large companies like Hannaford and that sort of thing, where the local farmers are more towards, farmers markets or, farm to table restaurants and that sort of thing. So I don't think there was much overlap of.
Okay.
And they're a lettuce producer, basically. They're not multi-vegetables. So
Right.
they're leafy vegetables only. And that was one of the things that the owner of the company explained, was that the win-win for them is setting up next to Hannaford's is one of their customers. And as Chris just said, they cater to the big grocery chains and those types of things. So there'll be virtually very little impact on the local agricultural community.
Sweet. Okay. Any other questions on this from anybody, or do we want to move on to another article? Or we done with the articles for now and you want to just, like look them over next week? I know that, does the Conservation Commission have articles on there for the land acquisition, or?
They have
I know,
2 articles to transfer 2 different parcels from the care and custody of the Board of Selectmen to Conservation. And there's the right of first refusal article, which I discussed as well, for 250 Howard Street, that they're in favor of obtaining the negotiated piece of land on 250 Howard Street.
Heather, on the change of care and custody articles, is there a cost? What is the cost to the town to go through the process of changing that custody?
I think the only cost would be recording the deed.
So that's like a couple $100 or something?
Right.
Okay.
right, and I think basically then it's just a situation where are we giving up an opportunity to convert that to taxable property? And I thought that there was a situation where somebody wanted to buy an adjacent parcel, but the Conservation Commission wants it. But I'm not sure if I heard that right. And
That's
I also,
250 Howard Street.
okay.
Howard.
And it's just,
Howard Street, sorry.
it just sounded like there was going to be, that actually it almost sounded like there needed to be discussion around several parcels and almost taking it as a group rather than doing them one at a time, just to get a sense of what the overall picture is.
Terry, there's 2 things going on that. The 2 that are on the article are completely landlocked. If you looked at them on the map, they're just surrounded by conservation land, and then Townsend or something. And then for the other properties in town where they may want to switch it from parks to conservation, or conservation to parks, or town to parks, or whatever, that's where they were looking at doing a bigger, broad assessment on. But if you look at those 2, it's pretty obvious that they should just go to conservation to make a contiguous piece of land.
Okay, thank you.
And the comment that was also made was that it's important to be careful what you change to care and custody of conservation because it's very, very, very difficult. And I think you were alluding to this, Terry, to take it back out of there. You have to go through the legislature to actually do it. Whereas care and custody between, say, the Board of Selectmen and Parks Commission, I think is much easier. You do the same thing as they're doing at town meeting to change the care and custody again. But once it's in conservation, it's a major project and process to get it back out.
Yeah, okay. Okay. All right, is there anybody that, I don't know if people had a chance to go through the articles. Is there anybody that we want to make sure that we invite to come and speak to the public hearing on the articles next week?
I'd like to hear if Dave Blatt's got any new information on streetlights. If he's available. If he's not, we can deal with it on town meeting 4.
Okay.
Maybe planning could come and read the stormwater management plan.
Oh, please,
change to
no.
us.
Please, no.
I turned into a pumpkin at 9 o'clock. No, 10 o'clock. I'm sorry.
I missed that altogether. I think I'm probably glad.
Chris wants to bring in planning to talk about the bylaw.
It's like 14 pages long.
Actually, I thought it was soon that they would have their own public hearing on that. I can't imagine. Adam will be happy to come and speak to it, I'm sure, but.
No.
But basically, I think for most of, well, I mean, hopefully we'll have a chance to review anything that we need to review before next week. So, and if there's stuff that we don't feel comfortable making a recommendation about, we'll just pass over. Anything else? Any committee reports?
No.
If nobody else has one, TC Passios Committee has met a couple of times. And we are, our last meeting was extremely productive as far as I'm concerned as a committee. For the first time, we went around the table and we prioritized the uses in the Passios building so that the architects can start to settle in and stop shuffling all the little pieces around and move to the next step of designing the individual spaces. I'm sorry I don't have the list in front of me and I don't even want to attempt to get it out, bring it from memory because I won't get it right. But ultimately the town offices and the school uses and school administrators' offices were at the very top of the list. And very low on the list at the moment because this is what crowded the building was the inclusion of Boys and Girls Club. They have not been cut out of the building completely, but we are going to plan the footprint without them initially and see if there's some space that could be set aside if they feel it's workable for them to have study areas and things like that that could augment their use of the gym and help them alleviate their issue of not having a quiet space in the building they're presently in. But we got to a point where there were so many uses that we were trying to fit into the building that was bulging at the seams before we even moved into the building, which is not what we wanted, the position we want to be in when we move into that building, because the town's going to have room for growth. So that's the basic point we are at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, Dave, I did watch those meetings and I would commend the board on the way that they handled that last meeting. I think prioritization is very important.
Yeah, I was really pleased, as I said at the beginning of my comments, that we worked it out. We didn't totally agree, but we came up with that prioritization and all agreed to it. And that was a big step to move this process forward because we've been treading water for the last 4 or 5 weeks, trying to make sure nobody got left out in the conversation.
Okay, thank you. And then if there's no other committee.
I do have just a brief. The school committee did meet last night. We heard a long report from them today, so I don't think I'll belabor it. But they did meet, and I did sit through that meeting too, which ended probably later than tonight's will. Also, I just wanted to report, because it's not on the agenda, I have made a little bit of progress in the last week or so on the debt study, and should,
Great.
in the time, I'm not going to present it visually tonight, but Heather shared with me the Vertex stuff. I've got a projected number now for Turkey Hill, or a planning number. The big number on the things that might cost us on big capital projects, particularly excluded projects, remains TC Passios. And I'm going to pull out now last year's financial forecast and lay over the revenue line and begin to get it all on one spreadsheet. And I discussed with the town manager today the process by which I should probably together with help from John and Dave, engage with Karen and our financial consultants to ultimately come up with some kind of perspective in terms of credit worthiness and how we should look at policy. So perhaps not at our next meeting, because we'll be doing a public hearing, but at the meeting after that, I can present in some detail.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Peter.
All right, minutes. There were two sets of minutes. June 11th is there, so we do need to vote on June 11th? Is that
Yeah, we
correct?
do. We do with the old committee.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'll be happy to entertain a motion to accept the minutes of June 11th.
I will move that we accept the minutes of June 11th as written.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Yep.
Okay, all in favor, and everybody can vote or abstain, it's up to you, but I believe that anybody can vote. So, Chris,
Abstain.
John,
Aye.
Heather,
Abstain.
Dave,
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Jay,
Aye.
and I for myself. Thank you. And then the other minutes that were in there were the minutes from, I forget the date.
August 27th. August 27th.
Thank you. Okay,
You're welcome.
so do I have any motion to accept the minutes of August 27th?
Did everyone look at them? Because I know Jay changed them.
Aye.
It was just a couple typos, that's all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's good. Thank you.
actually, I changed a few things, just typos, minor word changes, but the substance was the same. Very, very good set of minutes.
Okay. Okay.
Okay,
Make
so
a
there's
motion
no,
that we approve the August 27th minutes.
Second.
okay, so Chris made the motion, Peter seconded, and then
Okay.
all in favor. Chris,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Heather,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Jay,
Aye.
and I for myself. That takes care of any of the things we had to vote on. Next meeting is going to be, oh, I'm sorry. Do I have a public comment, any public comment from anybody on the committee?
Yes, I'd like to bring up one thing, and I saved it to now because I didn't want to get it tangled up in the other stuff we needed to talk about tonight. Agenda item on capital planning at the next meeting is going to be to discuss the capital planning committee's policies. In the presentation tonight, at the beginning, one of the slides for the capital budget that's going in a special town meeting, it lists the criteria for a capital project and calls it a fiscal policy section 3.02. Now, capital planning is going to talk about this, but capital planning has no control over changing this policy, correct? Because that's a policy created by the Finance Committee and accepted by the Board of Selectmen. Do I have that correct?
It's basically recommended to the Board of Selectmen by the Finance Committee, and the Board of Selectmen can make changes to it. But yeah, that's basically how it typically goes. It's a Board of Selectmen
Okay, so any changes that come out of our discussions at capital planning are submitted as suggestions to the finance committee for revamping the policy before any changes can be made. I just want to make sure I have that right going into the meeting.
I don't know if it has to go that route. Heather may know, but I think the capital planning committee could probably make that recommendation directly, and then it would just change. I mean, hopefully that we would be able to weigh in on them and how it affects the rest of the fiscal policies. But at the time that we wrote the fiscal policies and incorporated the capital planning discussion and policies, we were looking at a one-paragraph fiscal policy and expanding it to, you know, like at least a couple pages. So they're really, I would get confirmation on that from Heather, but I do believe that you could bypass us if you wanted to.
I think it makes sense to go to finance and then to the board.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to know the process before we're discussing it at the next meeting, because there is some sentiment, at least on part of the committee, to increase that $10,000 to some other larger number.
That makes sense.
Where does the existing policy live?
It's in the town's fiscal policy created by the finance committee or go ahead, Terry, you know it better than I do.
Well, actually, John knows exactly where it is, unless it moved. But I think we have a copy of it on the board page, yes?
I think we do. I know more about the process than what the policy is. I think it resides with the Board of Selectmen, so that's where you find it. But the process was that a group of us put the policies together and then submitted to the Board of Selectmen, who made a lot of changes to it, which they should. And then it came out under their imprimatur.
Right, but I think in the old iteration of the website, it was on the finance committee's page, had the document itself. If it's not there, then it should be available through the Board of Selectmen page. Any other public comment? There is no public comment sitting in my email. So with that, next week.
Really?
Wait, I believe.
I thought Mr. Rogers was.
There's at least one phone.
Yeah, Mr. Rogers.
Yes, Madam Chairman.
There we go.
Oh, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
Mr. Rogers.
Welcome.
I can't message a cell phone, so I was going to message you to ask, but I can't do that in this Zoom meeting.
Okay.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you.
There he
Dave
is.
Rogers, 82 Highland Street. I'll be brief because I know that it's late. First of all, I want to talk about Chapter 90, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but part of the reason that we had to float a $4 million bond issue for the roads is because we used Chapter 90 money for other things, okay? And I'm not naive enough to think that $170,000 plus $50,000, you couldn't do something of significance for a road. So I just caution everybody that we seem to be in good shape now, but this certainly could change if we continue to spend chapter money for things other than roads. Just my opinion. The school situation, and I listened to it, but I don't want to take this as gospel, because I misinterpreted or didn't get a clear understanding. But the Chromebooks, so-called, I was led to think that last budget period, it was paid for, or they made a commitment to buy those, and it was the money was put aside. My question is, couldn't this be logically and legally part of the grants that we're getting for COVID? And if so, the obvious inference is that that money could be used for something else that may not have the blessing of a grant. That's all. So I respectfully request that somebody look into that and see if anything can be done. Mr. Cassidy mentioned COVID-related unemployment costs, and I don't know what that is, and I would like some sort of a description of that. Excuse me, and because I don't know how that would relate, except that some people maybe have decided that they didn't want to continue in the employ under the conditions that existed, and it's just conjecture on my part.
Well, I can say that's only one way. There is actually the other way that it can hit you is if somebody works for the school district within a particular period, and then goes to work someplace else and gets laid off from that place because they can't go to work anymore. Then the district could still be on the hook for a portion of the unemployment benefits that would be available to that person.
Sure. Okay.
That's what we're seeing anyway. That's where our unemployment costs are coming from, because we didn't let anybody go, but we've had people who used to work for us show up.
Yeah. And I'm not conversant as how those things go, but Pete Beardmore hit the nail right on the head when he asked that, from my perspective anyway, when he asked that all of the monies that we'd be getting from these grants would be not commingled with our other funds in the town, because that way we can get a clear and distinct picture of what we received and what we expended, and equates to long-term needs for the school system. All right, so that's it for me. Thank you so much. I appreciate all your help, and
thank you.
Yes, Mr. Rogers, that actually is an excellent suggestion on the Chromebooks, and I think we should pursue that.
Yeah.
That could be, several $100,000 in free cash next year.
Yeah. Well, every little bit helps.
Yeah.
I'll look forward to your report, Peter, on the debt situation, because it obviously is a big thing, and I would encourage you to factor in some kind of monies, however I guess it might be. If we do go to the Passios building, we're still going to have some vacant properties, and it's going to be a cost to carry that. So I think that all factors into this whole thing. But you've forgotten more about this stuff than I'll ever learn, so I'll wait your presentation. And lastly, I'd like to say thank you for all that you do, because it's getting to be, not that it hasn't been, because it has, but it's getting to be more and more important as we travel down this rocky road, because nobody knows where the thing is going, and I pray to God that we can get this thing squared away. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Good. Thank you. Okay. With that, do we see anybody else? Okay. Now this part I don't understand. All right, and this is going to be frustrating the heck out of me. So I didn't see Mr. Rogers come in. Was it because I wasn't the host, so I didn't see him in the waiting room?
No, you got to be looking at the participants panel.
No, I'm looking at the participants panel.
Yeah.
But
He was in for
waiting
most of the meeting.
Yeah, he was there.
Yeah, he was.
Okay.
Yeah,
He was identified by phone number.
Okay. Well, I
Which
think it was
most of
all-
us have
You can
come to
type in
identify.
his last four digits of
Yeah, we all know
7248.
Dave's number by now.
Well, no, I think I probably spent most of the meeting thinking that was still Karen Brochu. So, all right. So then I didn't blow anything, because I keep watching for the waiting room to see if anything happens. But I'm thinking, maybe nothing happens after a while. So anyway, next week we will have the public hearing on the warrant articles. Please take a read. If you happen to be looking through them and you think, oh, it would be really good to make sure that we hear from a particular person, let me know. We'll get an invite out. And then we'll just go from there. Anticipate that next week we'll go through the process of reviewing the articles and determining whether or not we're going to make a recommendation at the time that we have the hearing. So we'll have the hearing, go through the list, go through article by article, and we'll make a determination that we're going to recommend to town meeting approval, we're going to recommend not approving it, or we're just going to pass it until we get to town meeting, or we'll make a determination that there's no financial impact. Or no, and typically, that's one of the other discussions that we haven't had a chance to have that maybe we should is, like what do we determine to be no material financial impact? Because we don't necessarily all read that the same way. And it would probably be good to have a better sense of why we would make that call. So with that, I am more than happy to accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
You're all dead. I'm sorry,
Second.
who moved? Was that John? John made the motion. Peter second. All in
seconded.
favor? Chris?
Aye.
We have to roll
John?
call vote.
Yeah.
John, did you say aye?
I didn't hear my name. Aye.
Okay. Heather?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
And I for myself. Thank you very much, everybody. It was a great
Night, everybody.
presentation.
Well,
and
thank you.
Great question.
Good.
Have a good night.
Good night.